Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of ThePrint's Virus Decode, where we answer all your questions about COVID with the help of experts. Today, we will be talking about drugs that are used today to treat COVID. Two new ones have been recommended by WHO. Those are Sotrovimab and Baricitinib. To get us answers, we have with us two experts, Dr. Virendra Chauhan. He is the former chairman of UGC and he's the former director of the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. He is also known for his work on the recombinant malaria vaccine. Also with us is Dr. M.K. Ganguly, who is the former ICMR director. He specializes in tropical and cardiovascular diseases and immunology. A warm welcome to both of our guests. Dr. Chauhan, may we start with you? Now, we have heard of monoclonal antibodies before and antibody cocktails as well. Can you walk us through how they work and how Sotrovimab works?
So all monoclonal antibodies to a disease like the present one, monoclonal antibodies are used for many disease conditions. Especially for cancer, they are very useful for cancer. So principle, I'll try to make it as less technical as possible for the viewer. So when you immunize or when you vaccinate or when you see a foreign material in the form of a pathogen or a protein, the body immediately responds to it and makes antibodies, which is one arm of the immunity, and also activate T cells, but we will not talk about T cells just now, just the B cells that make antibodies. Antibodies are like soldiers. They will remember, and the next time when you have the pathogen again or the protein again, and these soldiers are very capable of recognizing and neutralizing. All antibodies are not neutralizing antibodies, but subset of them are neutralizing. And as you see in the press or report or the newspaper, neutralizing antibodies are the ones which, as the name suggests, will get hold of the virus or any pathogen, or for that matter, any protein or which is expressed, which you want to neutralize. So what is monoclonal then? So the response to a given protein, a protein is shaped like my fist. You will get responses around the whole structure. So the immune system will see the whole structure and you'll get, we call them epitopes, but each region will produce a lot of antibodies. So you get a large number of antibodies, very large. These are called the polyclonal response. So you get very large number of antibodies. But if you have a determinant, which is, let's say, this portion, and you think that is the neutralizing part of the protein or of the pathogen, then you find ways to make antibodies only to this. So these are then antibodies taken out, then produced on large scale. Now recombinant technology can be used to produce many, many million copies of an antibody with neutralizing antibodies. And there's a technique how to make monoclonal from once you've identified. And so what you've been hearing, so you would have in principle monoclonal antibody therapy for any disease, as long as what you want to do is to neutralize the pathogen coming. So earlier on, so you would have not one monoclonal. In fact, many people can isolate many monoclonal, in fact, thousands of monoclonals. Then you find which of the monoclonal antibodies are efficacious. So you would have large number of molecules, but all of them may not have that efficacy. So what you're now beginning to see in the market, where the various name cocktail simply means instead of just having one antibody, you have two or three. So antibodies have that much role. Antibodies, monoclonal will not stop you from getting infection. These are curatives in that sense. So you have infection and you're getting onto, or you have cancer, and then you want to treat it. So this is how the monoclonal work. The other two drugs that you have earlier seen, one from Merck, one from Pfizer, and another one is in the pipeline. These are small molecules. These are chemical structures. All these have been repurposed. So they have been developed many years back. Pharma company have hundreds and thousands of them, and they screened all of them. So three of them, one is the Merck one is Pfizer one, right now seems to look better. Merck one, ICMR simply said that there are more risks than the benefits. So these are additional tools that are getting in our toolbox to deal with the current virus, in addition to very successful vaccination program. I hope I partly answered the question.
Yes, thank you very much. And in that vein, I would like to ask Dr. Ganguly. So baricitinib is described as a Janus kinase inhibitor, and that suppresses the overstimulation of the immune system. So it has also been used in rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune condition. So can you tell us a little bit about how this drug works?
Yeah, actually, Sotorimab, I want to say something about that also.
Yes, please.
That it was found that it's a monoclonal antibody by GSK. It has Regeneron and Eli Lilly monoclonal antibodies, cocktail antibodies, were not working against Omicron. It was tested, they were not working against Omicron. But somehow the GSK got lucky that Sotorimab works against Omicron, and this was just a pure luck. Normally, a cocktail should be used because if you use one, you can cause mutations. But Sotorimab does that. Baricitinib, India has completed trials, and drug controller office has gone through this. One of the things which happens during COVID infections, particularly the Delta variant and other, is the large surge of immune responses which attack your body. These are called autoimmune responses, and they choose almost every organ in the body and damage those. The kidney disease, kidney is one of the organs, liver is another organ, heart is one of the organs, lungs, of course, everyone knows, is one of the target organs, but the brain also is one of the organs. And these immune responses, they, in certain percentage of persons, they actually cause damage. And these damage could be measured before through the biomarkers. At the moment, the biomarker repertoire is not too many which were being used, but now the proteomic and other studies have appeared in very reputed journal like Cell and other publications, and we have a series of biomarkers which could be studied in these subjects to identify who could be more prone to the damage. And substances like baricitinib and others perhaps will benefit them. So many of the immunosuppressants which have been used, that those have been used to really quell the immune responses, which could damage your own self because of the COVID-19 infection. Baricitinib is one of them. Tocilizumab, etc., several other anti-inflammatory substances have also been used in these substances. They also cause some harm. Baricitinib doesn't do that, but others can cause the reactivation of the infections which are latent. And these latent infections are worrying. There are tuberculosis, pneumocystis carinii, so many of other fungal infections, etc. So instead of steroid, which is one of the best immunosuppressants and for others, but could cause damage, tremendous damage, some of these have been used. These monoclonal antibodies or these substances which have been used for this are awfully expensive, and they are expensive because they have to be used in 50 milligram or 100 milligram dosages. So you have to have very efficient fermentation system to produce these. So these are few the challenges. But as Dr. Chauhan was saying, there are two new antivirals which have been now available. They have given a lot of hope. The molnupiravir actually within 2 days reduces the virus 90% if given early. Few of the studies which were available in the animals as which could cause teratogenic or they could cause problems in pregnant women are present in many other drugs. One of the drugs I myself was part of the discovery and putting in India was an anti-leishmanial drug which which could be given orally. So this was also found to be the same. So what you do that in pregnant women or you don't give it, and if they are childbearing age and you are giving it, you do a pregnancy test and then give it, and then advise them that you don't do the family planning. But and it is so easily synthesized, and India companies are 6 companies are synthesizing it. Then the Paxlovid, which is a Pfizer drug, which is very complex, 6-step synthesis drug, very complex drug. What is what it up to 80%, 90% of that viruses it could destroy if given early. It is better than molnupiravir, and this also got sanctioned now. And this one, Pfizer is also had called for applications from the developing world that those who want to do that, and the last date was January 6th. So probably by March, this should be available in the global market also. At the moment, limited quantities are available in United States. So there will be a repertoire of drugs which will be new monoclonal antibodies, which will be developed against Omicron and new variants. There will be the existing one which has been tested better, and there will be new antivirals which will get perhaps emergency authorization because an NCI takes around 3 to 5 years minimum if you are very quick to materialize and get into the market. But now the total regulatory system around the world is changing, and maybe we will have more things to do to combat this virus in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Ganguly. With that, I want to pass on to Abantika. In your reporting, you do talk to doctors, and then, of course, you also do some pharma reporting. So in your experience, what has it been like whenever new drugs have been approved? How quick is the uptake? Do doctors receive the drugs immediately? In terms of usage, and immediately start prescribing its use, or does it typically take some time?
So the time is in the availability. Once the availability happens, then something interesting. We saw something very interesting in the last wave, especially during the second wave with Remdesivir. When it came to a point when doctors started saying that we are prescribing it under pressure because the family is distraught. They want us to, prescribe. You remember there was a time when there was a shortage of Remdesivir, and it came to a point when, doctors were of the opinion that maybe this patient does not need the medicine, but families started getting so hyper, they had to use it. The same thing happened, that was not a new drug, but it had severe consequences. Same thing happened with steroids, the overuse. In fact, that is partly why today the new clinical treatment the clinical treatment guidelines for COVID that have been released by the ministry this morning, there there are not much changes since last time, but it has been spelled out very clearly that overuse of steroids can sort of predispose patients to mucormycosis. Please do not, use it unless warranted, and those particular circumstances are given. So I think, especially in COVID, where there is so much focus, and all of us, we report upcoming drugs with a lot of sort of regularity, much, much more than, say, any other disease we have ever done, probably. Now, what happens is whenever a new drug comes, and because people are desperate to get like a magic cure, we like to talk in absolutes, and unfortunately, science doesn't allow that. But, there is this, every time for the latest, I think, is Molnupiravir, when, the jury is still out on how safe or not safe it is. But people still want it to be used because they think that's the new magic cure. So, yeah, if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think Dr. Ganguly is having a bit of a connection issue.
Can I just add?
Yes, please, Dr. Chauhan.
Can I just add to what Ganguly Sahab is saying about these drugs? So when both the drugs were being approved by FDA in the process, many countries, including some in Southeast Asia, had already placed orders, even when they were yet not FDA approved. In fact, Merck drug was first approved in UK. And Merck, by own admission, initially said there's a 50% efficacy. And within 3 weeks, they came up and said the efficacy actually is lesser than what they observed earlier. So the point that patients or the family press you, when this is the human tendency, when you see there is nothing working, it's a small ray of hope somewhere, you rushed. So adoption of these drugs will not be a problem. But people need to understand these drugs will not be effective halfway through the infection. They have to be given in the beginning. If the viral load has become high, then the drugs will, and you have to take a lot of pills. These are 5 days courses running into 40 pills. So, and they have to be consumed very earlier on. And so there's a catch. So your infection has to be detected earlier on. So your detection system has to be very good. So in a country where they'll be taken up, or countries they'll be taken up, your ability to detect the virus earlier on has to be, it will be problem in poor countries, it will be problem in Africa. Most of these drugs produced by Pfizer and Merck have already been ordered in millions of doses. So availability will be problem. The final thing about these two, and hope for the subsequent drugs, which are repurposed drugs, that these companies are signing license contracts with the country, especially India, it becomes very important, with a generic company upfront. As the drugs are being developed, these licensure has been worked out. So therefore, larger amount of these drugs will be available. So availability, cost will be still a problem. In the $700 is what we heard earlier. So it will be expensive, but it'll be there. And once a country like India and Israel and Korea, they start producing in vast amount, then of course the cost will come down. So good thing is about these generic the drugs, they will be produced by generic manufacturer, and availability, at least in the market, will not be a very big issue.
Thank you. Welcome back, Dr. Ganguly. And I'm actually going to start taking some of our viewer questions as well right now. So first, Anita asks, and I think Dr. Ganguly, you could answer this. How does ICMR arrive at treatment guidelines? Is it mandatory for doctors in India to follow the guidelines?
Actually, doctors are the kings, you know. If the drug controller of General of India have approved a drug for a particular label claim, the doctors could use it, but they could heed ICMR guideline if they wish, and they could also use it off-label. Like I will give you one example. Like cetanophil citrate was used for an erectile dysfunction. But people knew that it works against nitric oxide synthetase. So in the blue baby syndrome, to save the babies, some of the doctors used it off label. And now it has become a practice to use it in blue babies. The same way for pulmonary hypertension, there was no treatment available. So, but one of the discoveries which happened in pulmonary hypertension and the high altitude was it is also if you deal with the nitric oxide issue, you could deal with the pulmonary hypertension. So doctors started using off-label those drugs, and thereby they started actually uh, using it in pulmonary hypertension now, both as a drug as well as a gene therapy. So doctors make a decision about the patient if they have sufficient proof of concept, if they have been used around the globe, and there are good data about its safety, and there is a good data about its efficacy, which they think will benefit the patient. And if the Drug Control General of India has approved that drug, they can use that drug. But guidelines are normally made by analyzing a lot of data which is coming up from the different trials. And these guidelines are updated from time to time because they are not patthar ki lakir, as we call it. As we have seen, so many things in the COVID had fallen down the line, whether it was a chloroquine, whether it was ivermectin, colchicine, you just name it. There is a huge graveyard of the substances which has come as a guideline and have gone. But doctors use their experience also. So that is how the things are gone. I have myself chaired the INC committee for about 18 years. Now, even when I was out of ICMR, I had chaired for a certain number of years. And we weigh a lot of data sets before it is approved of India. And many times now, in case of this disease, we are taking sometimes a WHO pre-qualification as well as a US FDA or Canada Health or Australian FDA and EMA. If they have gone the approval over there, so for a quick availability of those drugs, if we don't, we sometimes the Indian regulator approves them early under emergency authorization while you get enough data for ultimately using those. So these are some of the things which actually, but few things, if a drug is being approved, ethically there are few things which are important. Firstly, that it should be available in the country. If it is not available in the country, then it causes very big problem. There was a drug known as beta-seron, which at one time was used for multiple sclerosis. But in those days, the technology was not that advanced. It could be produced enough for the United States patients only. So India didn't allow this to be approved in India through trials because it was simply, it will not be available. So those who participate in the trial, they will actually waste the effort, as well as it will be ethically taking advantage of the population. One of the questions which you asked earlier, I will like to deal with this, that always it used to come as a major dampener that some of the drugs which were discovered, they were too costly for the other countries. So there was a committee which was formed in WHO to create thinking that you can have those patented entities in the developed world.
I said that. Gangli sir, I explained that already.
Okay, so I'm just giving my last thought in this, that because I was part of that committee, and what we actually looked at that time, that there were 3 or 4 mechanisms which we actually advocated. One, patenting the pool, getting a patenting pool and allowing this to be done in other places. And one thing happened which actually caused this uproar much more, that there was H5N1 infection, and Indonesia sent its strain to Australia, and they made a vaccine out of it, and they sold it, they tried to sell it in Indonesia at $28 a dose. In $1, you can buy 7 or 8 chicken in Indonesia. So $28 was something which created uproar. So after that, this open licensing system came up. And one of the best example was hepatitis C drug, which is now available. And even Egypt made it still better. It's sold in around 300 rupees, the entire dosage of the hepatitis C. So the pricing, as Dr. Chauhan has explained, the same happened in the hepatitis B vaccine. When
Dr. Ganguly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've been, despite all of this, even now with COVID, we're still facing vaccine inequity and like Dr. Chauhan mentioned, even drug inequity at this point. And a lot of the times, in fact, there are even drugs that are proven to not work, which are getting sold out. I just want to go to Abantika for a second. Abantika, have we still, whenever people get diagnosed and go to say their family physicians or something, and you look at the prescription, people are getting things like azithromycin, vitamin C, zinc, and, like medicines which we know are not going to work or are just not going to be helpful at all. So can you name a few of these drugs that you think that you can notice that are still being prescribed indiscriminately? Something like ivermectin, are those kind of drugs still in the picture?
Actually, azithromycin, one of our own colleagues tested positive. She sent me her prescription. Actually, 3 people in the family were positive. All 3 had azithromycin in that list. Also vitamin C, zinc, everything was there. So I think a lot of the medicines that we started off using and those that were not sort of expressly instructions were that please don't use them. A lot of those continue to be used. Hydroxychloroquine is an interesting exception, I think, because at one point of time, I think every doctor in the country was having it. That has stopped now, thankfully. Nobody is having that. But I believe a lot of doctors are still having vitamin C, zinc themselves for protective reasons. So I think on COVID, there's so much that is, it's such a dynamic situation. So much is happening, so much is coming in, so much is going out. By the time you have sort of acclimatized to the new rules, a new wave is there. So then you go back to what you think worked last time. So I think that's a kind of inevitable in a sense.
Yeah, but hopefully with these guidelines, the guidelines now are much clearer, and the WHO's graphic is also really good, and it tells you exactly when to use which drug. Yeah, so hopefully it might be a bit more positive now. Dr. Chauhan, speaking about antibiotics, I just wanted to quickly ask you, given the indiscriminate prescription of azithromycin and doxycycline, what is there a real risk of contributing to antibiotic resistance?
Oh, absolutely. And you've said it very mildly. There's obviously these drugs, we are very good at making these drugs ineffective very fast, and especially when you don't need them. And this is a very layered situation. There's so much misinformation on the on the social media, on the internet. There's so much information you can obtain yourself. People have gone hoarse. We have said so much about what doesn't work, but that hasn't stopped. So I'm very surprised sometimes some of the GPs' insistence of not reading what WHO is saying or what ICMR is saying. I'm just amazed. So this misbehavior, in fact, to be, the one part of your question is this: not only the successful antibiotics, the future antibiotics. People don't want to even discover new antibiotics because countries like India, Indonesia, the Southeast Asia, they fear the moment they introduce them, in no time they will be misused and there will be resistance. And bacteria are very, very efficient in getting infected. So overuse of antibacterial should be really, it's going to be a serious problem. It's already a serious problem. In fact, if COVID disappears tomorrow, we are back to going to the most important health problem would be antibiotic resistance. And COVID situation, the bad behavior right now is only going to add to the situation. So this is going to be a serious, serious issue. And doctors, I don't know how to give this message. You can say the public have this response. You have no idea what to do. You can't access a doctor. You walk over to a chemist and chemist gives you an antibiotic or prescription. That is the old story in India. That's why there is rampant antibiotic resistance. There are patients who just die off because their chest infection cannot be cleared. And trust me, that number is getting larger and larger and larger because even vancomycin doesn't work on them. So yes, to answer to your question is yes. And once COVID goes away, and it will go away, it will become endemic and finally it will disappear. The biggest problem this country or all over the world will face will be antibiotic resistance. Both gram-negative bacteria and gram-positive bacteria, especially gram-negative bacteria. They kill very large number of old people.
Yeah, and the more we find out about antimicrobial resistance, the more scary it is. Recently, a research came out which showed that, in fact, antimicrobial resistance evolved before we started using antibiotics in nature, and now it also spreads between species when the bacteria do. So it's actually quite a scary thought, like you said.
They are very efficient. They are very efficient by using different mechanism, each different from the other, getting over. So therefore, usage of this has to be very careful, very, very careful.
Right.
As it is in Europe, as it is in developed country, you can't access a third generation antibiotic in England at all unless you have a prescription.
Yeah,
but that's a discussion for another day.
Definitely. Indeed. And in fact, I would have loved to bombard you both with more questions, but unfortunately, we've reached the end of our time right now. Thank you so much, Dr. Ganguly and Dr. Chauhan, for answering our questions. And we hope this was really helpful to the viewers as well. And also really hope that indiscriminate usage of medicines that are not needed starts to come down now, especially during and after the third wave. Thank you also to Abantika for joining us, and please do join us for our next session. Thank you.
Thank you.